It was 1994. Sonic the Hedgehog 3 was out, and in its opening moments, our cool blue hedgehog hero gets his lights punched out by a radical red echidna. Throughout this game and its sister title, Knuckles stands in our way, bringing the strength while Sonic brings the speed. Even though they realize they're both being conned by Dr. Eggman, they go their separate ways as rivals, and for the next few years, they'd butt heads in games, comics, and TV shows. Eggman was always the big bad, but Knuckles was the only guy that could stand toe-to-toe with the blue blur. Then, 2001 rolls around. Sonic Adventure 2 releases, and there's a new face in town, Shadow the Hedgehog. He's kinda like Sonic, but with even more attitude. They're turned against each other by Dr. Eggman, and though they team up to save the day, they part as rivals. And for the next few years, they butt heads in games, comics, and TV shows. Strange, huh? Knuckles is still a fixture of the series, but his dynamic with Sonic gets pushed more and more to the background, until he feels like a sidekick. There's a three-pronged dynamic between hero, villain, and rival that's pretty popular in fiction. Your hero is kind, determined, and persistent in a quest to save the day. Your villain is the opposite of many of your hero's traits. If the hero is small, the villain is big. If the hero is powerful, the villain uses tools and tricks. And then there's the rival. They may be very similar to the hero, though with some aspects of the villain. They're usually an antagonist, someone for the hero to measure up to. But when shit hits the fan, they'll put it aside and work together for the greater good, or to save their own skin. Over time, writers can get bored or greedy. A new character is introduced that fills one of the antagonist roles, and their predecessor often flounders as a result. Usually, the rival gradually becomes more heroic, until they end up joining the hero's side full-time, and are replaced by a new rival. Expect them to become less relevant or weaker relative to the new trio. This can happen to the villain too, though a bit less often. I don't think this is always a bad thing, and it can be well written. But there's only so many times the hero but evil card can be pulled successively before the room gets kind of crowded. In Dragon Ball's 22nd World Tournament arc, Tien Shinhan emerges as a rival to Goku. He's the star pupil of the Crane School, the enemy of Goku's Turtle School, and gives him a run for his money. Like our hero, he has strange abilities, like flight and the Tri-Beam. Despite their feud, he becomes Goku's ally in the fight against King Piccolo. But then, King Piccolo lays an egg that turns into Piccolo Jr., and he becomes the next major antagonist the heroes face. In the 23rd tournament, Goku defeats and moves past Tien, with the focus on Piccolo, and by the time we move into Dragon Ball Z, Tien has become relegated to one of the Z fighters. Piccolo takes center stage as Goku's rival turned ally, and is the foremost opponent against the Saiyans when they arrive. Speaking of which, Vegeta, the main antagonist of the Saiyan saga, becomes a deuteragonist in the succeeding saga against Frieza, and continues to serve as such going forward. Piccolo becomes relatively weaker and weaker as time goes on, and Tien doesn't even show up to the fight by the end of Z, constantly dethroning Goku's rivals, makes his gaggle of friends grow larger and less important as time goes on. Not that Piccolo hasn't had his share of great moments since, but he'll never serve the same role as Vegeta does. On the other hand, one series that has been pretty good about maintaining its dynamic is Kirby. Since Kirby's adventure, it's been pretty firmly set. Kirby is the hero, DDD is the villain, and Meta Knight as the rival. Their abilities, motivations, and builds fit the tropes exactly. Kirby's a little guy, always out to save the day, while DDD is a big penguin, usually out for himself. Meta Knight is of similar size and build to Kirby, but uses swordplay, and is a proud warrior that must prove himself. Kirby games usually feature a battle with both of them in some fashion, and if a new rival appears, it's usually one of them with a new coat of paint. One could say that DDD has been dethroned as the main villain, but he's rarely ever been the true final boss. I like to think he still fits the dynamic, even 31 years later. Another classic game series with this dynamic is Mega Man. Mega Man 3 introduces Breakman, also known as Proto Man. He's Rock and Roll's older brother, who allies with Wily, but throws his family a bone often enough that he eventually becomes another hero. Then, 4 games later, Bass shows up, who was literally created to rival Mega Man's abilities. By Mega Man 10, you can play as all three of them fighting against Wily. Base, at least, still serves as an independent party, working against Wily and Mega Man. But there's no longer a pretense of Proto Man being mysterious. If he shows up, it's to help, not returning to the fold simply out of stubbornness. In Bleach, Ichigo fought with his first rival Uryu for like one arc. Then, he started fighting Renji a lot, before moving on to Grimmjow. Ichigo was always speedrunning his development though, so it makes sense he'd move from rival to rival pretty quickly. Kill la Kill sets up a grudge match almost immediately between Ryuko and Satsuki, with their first fight in episode 3. They even have similar matching uniforms they use to fight each other. Then, as Ryuko moves ever closer to her rematch, Nui shows up, wielding the other half of the scissor blade. It's not a full displacement at first, as Satsuki and Ryuko still end up facing each other. But by the time the former turns good, Nui firmly takes over the rival seat. If you've even heard of the Spider-Verse movies, you know there's more versions of Spider-Man than there are US presidents. For Spider-Man, it's hard to define a singular villain for the dynamic. But in terms of evil versions of Spider-Man, there's no shortage of those. The most famous of those is Venom. But he went the route of Piccolo and Knuckles by becoming a hero, going on to lead his own franchise. Carnage was introduced as an even more evil knockoff, because 90s comic books were a never-ending edge competition. Wait, that didn't come out right. The 90s wasn't done with Spider-Man yet, because we had a whole saga of clones. Ben Reilly was Spider-Man with angst. Then there's Kane, an even angstier spider clone. What about Spider-Side, a fucked up clone that likes to kill other clones? Or Doppelganger, a thing that looked like Spider-Man. The Flash did something similar, especially in the TV series, with an endless tirade of evil speedsters with palette swaps of his costume. Reverse Flash? Alright, simple enough. Zoom? Okay. Savitar? Getting a bit repetitive here. Godspeed? Trajectory? Okay, this one's literally just called The Rival. I'm not making this shit up. I am breaking my own rules a bit, as a good amount of these are villains rather than rivals. But it shows that whenever you have characters that are the hero but evil, there's this fixation on constantly trying to one-up them. Trying to bring in someone new that's stronger, crueler, more mysterious. Carnage to Venom, Kane to Ben, Savitar to Zoom. Hell, even going back to Sonic, there's more examples of Sonic knockoffs. Metal Sonic came first, and Silver entered the scene not too long after Shadow. Blaze the Cat doesn't look like him, but fits the same role in her world. Each and every one of them now fight tooth and nail for the spotlight, often going years without appearances. Whether you play it as a melee à trois, or 2 against 1, there's plenty of potential in the hero-rival-villain dynamic. But a story can only focus on so many characters at once, and replacing your rival usually means the old one will never see the prominence that they used to. However, I love Shadow the Hedgehog. I love Vegeta. I think Base is neat, and I'm far from the only one who thinks so. Their additions don't ruin the story, and they have unique enough designs and personalities that they stand out from the crowd. But contenders like Silver, Skullface, Savitar, Spider-Side, maybe a bit much when they don't add much of value or substance. Why is this? There's one trait Shadow, Vegeta, and Base all share. Their predecessors were similar, but still distinct from the hero. Like Sonic, Knuckles is a powerful, heroic Mobian. However, he's an echidna, focuses on strength rather than speed, and is more stoic. Shadow is another hedgehog, with speed-based powers and a cocky attitude, ultimately closer to the hero he's pitted against. You have a similar phenomenon with Piccolo and Vegeta. The former is more level-headed and strategic, and Namekians have a much different background than Saiyans, even if they're both aliens. These newer rivals have similar enough motivations and growth potential that they're less likely than their predecessors to outgrow the rivalry. Knuckles' goal was always to protect the Master Emerald, and he usually stayed out of other affairs. Piccolo wanted to be stronger, but was never going to keep up with the Saiyans, and defaulted to being more of a leader. Granted, these developments happened as a result of being displaced, but it's in line with who they are as characters. These examples are also known for their massive egos, not the ones who would be willing to step aside and become a sidekick. If someone new shows up to challenge the hero, will the rival really take that threat standing down? Given that this trope appears most often in long-running media, fan reaction also plays a big part. I don't really have a conclusion to this video. There's just a lot of examples of this I've noticed in the stuff I watch. Join my Discord, fuck the government, drink plenty of water, and I love you, bye!